What's up, guys? My name is Grant. I am a local real estate agent in the Tampa Bay area, and today we're going to be talking about exactly how much it costs to buy a home on average in 2021. We're going to be talking about the closing costs, we're going to be talking about the down payment, we're going to be talking about everything along those lines to see how much it will actually cost you out of pocket to get into your next home. Let's get right into it. Most people think that you need years of income saved up to put 20% down on a house. That's a common thing that people think. Or they start to look at signs that say invest in real estate with no money down, just pay them tens of thousands of dollars, even though you could buy a house with that much money sometimes. I want to clear up a lot of these confusions and hopefully give you a realistic expectation of how much it will actually cost to buy a house. I'm going to be talking about two things mainly. First one is going to be fixed costs that are in relation to practically every real estate deal that you're going to have to pay no matter what. And then next, the second one is going to be the down payment. Those are going to be the main two costs overall. So the first fixed cost that we're going to see is inspection. And on average, I estimate, and most of my clients, we work with a few different inspectors in the area. On average, it's going to cost anywhere from $300 to $350 for a full basic inspection, including a 4-point and a wind mitigation inspection, which is what's required for your insurance company. So that's something that you're going to be paying out of pocket within the first few weeks of going under contract while you're within that inspection period. In the first few days, often within 3 days of going under contract, you're going to have to give the title company of the seller's choice, the title company that they chose, the escrow deposit. Not only will you have to pay the $300 to $350 first few weeks for the inspection, but usually oftentimes within the first 3 days of going under contract, you're going to have to give your escrow deposit or earnest money deposit. So on average, there is technically no average, you can't technically say that it is, but most of the times I'm seeing roughly 1% of the purchase price go into escrow. And what that money does and goes to is it's just kind of like a show of faith, right? So on a $200,000 home, you'd put $2,000 within escrow within the first 3 days. What that is you give it to the title company to hold on to. And if the sale goes through, that money will just go towards your down payment cost. So it's not technically anything you lose at all unless you end up backing out later down the line for a reason you're not necessarily supposed to. So the seller is going to go ahead and keep that money kind of because you wasted their time. So oftentimes it's never something to worry about, especially if you have a good agent working with you or you understand the process yourself. But oftentimes, as long as you back out within that 15-day inspection period or whatever it is, you can get that escrow deposit back, no questions about it, very easily from the title company. The only thing you would have paid out of pocket is the inspection costs, hypothetically, if you backed out due to the inspection being bad or something like that. So right away, we're already out of pocket roughly 1% for the escrow, as well as $350 for the inspection. Next thing you're gonna end up having to pay is the appraisal. And on average, I'm seeing lenders charging, which they're charging it for their appraiser. Oftentimes it ends up being roughly $500. And that's very, very common, and I would say based upon so many transactions that I've seen, that $500 is oftentimes roughly what you're going to end up paying for the appraisal. So things to consider up front: you're already out of pocket on a $200,000 home. We got $300 to $350 for the inspection, 1% for the appraisal, 1% for the escrow, and then another $500 appraisal offer. Then once you have those first few things lined up and paid for, sometimes, which all these are very common and practically happen nearly every transaction, the next thing you're going to have to pay for is your closing costs. Technically, those other things could be wrapped into those closing cost category, but we're separating it for this video and for these educational purposes. But on average, everybody hears about closing cost. It is a sum of different things. It's not necessarily just one item. And let me read you off a list of what's included in the closing cost. The closing cost would include things like any HOA dues, whether it be quarterly or monthly, any CDD fees, any HOA transfer fees, as well as all of your loan and processing fees that the lender would be charging you, or your mortgage officer or the bank. Whoever's giving you that money, they're going to be charging you fees. Then from there, you're going to have title and escrow and settlement fees, which would be fees that the title company charges you for handling the paperwork, doing the work, things like that. And then depending on if you do end up paying your buyer's agent or the seller's paying the buyer's agent, that could be considered a fee on top of that. I know in different areas, sometimes the buyers will end up paying the buyer's agent depending on the situation, but oftentimes that's not something the buyer will end up paying for. Then you have government recording and transfer charges. And then there's other miscellaneous items, which could include like your home insurance and your taxes prorated for a few months, things like that. Those are all the different things that would make up your closing cost. And on average, all that stuff is usually going to add up to roughly 3% of your home's purchase price. So on a $200,000 home, that would equate to roughly $6,000 out of pocket for your closing, right? And that's not including your appraisal or your inspection. And then obviously the escrow deposit, that's obviously deducted because you already put that money into escrow. So that just goes towards whatever it ends up costing in the end. So if it ends up costing you $10,000 out of pocket out of the home, because you already put $2,000 in escrow, it will only cost you $8,000, if that makes sense. So the next cost is going to be your down payment, which on average in today's market and with all the buyers and sellers I'm working with, oftentimes it will range, honestly. It could range anywhere from 3% to 20%. On average, I'm seeing individuals usually put 5% down. Oftentimes they're taking advantage of the very, very low interest rates right now, but 5% is very common that I'm seeing. So for example, if it costs you $200,000 for the home, you would be paying roughly 3% in total for your closing cost, right? In this example, that's $6,000 for closing. Then you'd be putting 5% down. That's another $10,000. So right there, to buy a $200,000 home, on average, it would cost you about $16,000, which is 8%. So you could think of it like whatever home you're going to end up buying, you can think about paying 8%. And obviously these things vary based upon what county you're in, what state you're in, because your taxes could be very, very different and really bring that number up or down. But on average, that's what I'm seeing where I work in the state of Florida, Tampa Bay area. Which is a pretty fair price. So if you can still find a $200,000 home and only have to pay $16,000 out of pocket to obtain it, that's pretty fair in my opinion, but there is more. So thank you so much for sticking around all the way till the end. So I'm going to give you these great tips to hopefully get that payment way down or your cost to close way down. There's certain things that you could do, like qualify for a lower down payment program, right? Just like the FHA, I'm sure you've heard of. That is roughly 3.5% down in total. There are other lower down payment programs which might only require 3% down, right? Which is even better than 3.5% oftentimes, more like all the time. So if you're able to qualify for one of those lower down payment programs, the home could cost you even less versus 5%. And then as well, if you have a great buyer's agent working with you, or you can do it yourself, you can negotiate with the seller to have them fund some of your closing costs. Oftentimes, you'd have to ask your lender about this to see what the maximum contributions might be. Oftentimes, it's usually going to be 3%. So what did we talk about earlier? The average price of your closing cost is going to be 3%, but the max contributions that the seller could give you is oftentimes 3%. So you could potentially walk into a home, and let's bring it back to a $200,000 example. Before it costed you $16,000, 5% for the down payment, 3% for closing costs. Let's say you had a great buyer's agent working with you, myself or anyone on my team. We could get potentially 3% of the closing cost paid for, 3% of the purchase price of the closing cost paid for, so there covers your closing cost. And then that 5%, we can see if you qualify for one of those 3% or 3.5% down payment programs, right? Bringing the total cost of your home only to roughly $6,000 to $8,000, nearly half of the $16,000 price difference. So that's something to think about. I hope you guys found value in that. That's kind of the common numbers I'm seeing. So to wrap it all up, roughly 8% of your purchase price. It can go up or down depending on where you're at, but that's how much it's going to cost you to buy a home. I hope you got value, and I will see you in the next video.